Okay. Good morning or good afternoon, everybody. This is our little project that we're starting up. Currently, we're calling ourselves the a name,
Name pending.
and yes, all four of us are members of our Revolution Los Angeles. I myself, my name's Rueben Vargas. I'm calling from my garage here in Chino, and I'm the social media and communications lead. Let's go ahead and introduce ourselves, starting with you, Steve.
I'm still Steve the Philosophist. This is my cat Rin I have here in the background.
hmm
He's a street cat. I adopted him from a friend's garage where he was found, abandoned by his mother. Um, anyway, uh, yeah. So I'm here just to shoot the shit. So,
Wonderful.
oh, I'm also the treasurer of ORLA, if that matters.
Okay. Next, David, would you introduce yourself?
So I'm David. I'm the uh, San Fernando Valley correspondent of the group. And I also am active in ORLA and what is it, the Diamonds? It's been so long since we've.
Yeah, I think we're gonna eventually transition from the suit system. So that's why I said communications and social media team. But I believe you're my number two, right, David?
Right,
Okay.
exactly.
All right. So, and last but not least, Isaac.
Yeah, and I'm Isaac, and I am a noted Democratic Party infiltrator. I destroyed the MPP, and I will strike again. ORLA member for a little while now, not as much as some of my compatriots, but I can say that I will, of course, destroy this organization like I have every other progressive group that I have been a part of.
Good.
Inshallah.
Inshallah.
Okay.
I should also mention that I'll be speaking on behalf of every single gay person in America. So,
Oh, good. I'm
David.
glad we have one of those.
yeah.
Ah, yes. Oh, yes, and I'm the token minority.
David,
Yes.
for what it's worth, I didn't know that about you, and I didn't want to presume anything about you.
Oh, that's funny. I just assume that it's obvious, but
You have to understand, I'm not the sharpest tool in the shed. So
I mean, even a hammer's blunt, but it can cause some damage. Wise Chinese proverb.
okay,
There you go. Let me just.
I'm not a very observant person.
Don't worry. We can fix that. Either way, what was the first thing that we have for us today? That
Well,
lovely check that His Highness Joseph R. Biden of the state of Delaware
well,
has given to all of us.
and that's what I wanted to bring up as today's first topic of discussion.
Yeah.
Stimulus.
wait,
Who
so have we
has?
all gotten it?
Well, I have. David,
I
you
have.
have. I know Steve hasn't. He's told me
Yeah,
that.
nothing
How
yet.
about you, Isaac? Have you received yours yet?
Well, as a dependent, I can't exactly say if I'm entitled to receive one, but I don't think I have.
Okay, that's fair enough.
Mm.
Now, one thing that has kind of that I have observed from social media, and this has been verified, that apparently Wells Fargo is holding stimulus checks until Wednesday, and for whatever reason, a lot of people are ascertaining that this is so that they can reap stuff like fees and interest from those checks. And
Ah,
yeah. So if anything, I think this is a good lesson for everybody that if you're able to take your money out of a big bank and put it in a credit union.
Mhm.
I do my banking through Airhead Credit Union. Not only not only are there no ATM fees if you're part of the co-op network, but I know my money isn't being used in shady shit like that. So
I'll say one thing. I certainly appreciate some of the generous acts been done for landlords by banks such as this. I can recall a little while ago when I saw on the Twitter a nice little image, and it showed a message from somebody's landlord, and it said something along the lines of, "We understand with the COVID crisis that everything is difficult, but we decided to lighten the load by providing you this free envelope for which you can then send your rent check to us."
God.
Man.
They even paid for the stamp and everything. I think that's a little bit of that from the banks. It's like, yes, we are so kind to subtract these charges and fees so that you won't have to worry about them. Peace of mind. Peace of mind.
Benevolent oligarchy.
Oh
Yeah.
God,
So considerate.
what a country. Lord have
Yep,
mercy.
what a country. Like what was the name of that comedian? That boomer comedian? What a country.
What a God. Oh yes, freaking oh God. Yakov Smirnov. Oh my
Yep.
God. What a country.
Yeah. I think there's a reason why he left Soviet Russia, if you catch my drift.
Oh boy.
So, but I did want to say, like, I was impressed. This is the fastest I got any of the stimulus checks. I
Mhm.
don't know if that, I don't know why that is, or if it's just where I was on the list or whatever.
Well, David,
But it's
who do
good
you?
politics. That's all I'm saying. It's good politics.
Okay, and who's your bank, David?
I'm with Los Angeles Federal Credit Union because, like you pointed out, Ruben, it's so important to move your money out of the big banks and put them in a credit union, which I did back in like 2017 in response to the Dakota Access Pipeline drama.
You know, speaking of which, one thing on banks and the Dakota Access Pipeline, I follow football, you know, repping Seahawks, but I remember years ago when the Dakota Pipeline, the Dakota Access Pipeline protests were at its height. It was at a Vikings game. They're up in Minnesota, where U.S. Bank is headquartered. And during the game, a couple protesters climbed to the top of the U.S. Bank arena and unfurled a giant banner that said "Divest" with a tiny little facsimile of the U.S. Bank logo at the very bottom. The broadcasters didn't show that. I learned about it after the fact, but there's a lot of shady stuff that the big banks put their money in with our deposits, and that's why I urge everybody listening, everybody watching, please, if you're able to, take your money out of any big branch, your U.S. banks, your Banks of America, your Wells Fargo's, your Chases, what have you. Put them into a local federal credit union. You won't get dicked around, and you'll have that safety of mind knowing that your money isn't being used on nefarious shit, basically.
I'll say one thing as to how quickly the checks went out. I would say that this is one of the nice differences between a Democratic administration and a Republican one. I mean, like back during the Republican one, it took like a couple of months just to get the checks out, and they would send you like a note alongside it telling you to feel sorry that you're sucking on the government teat. But on the other hand, you have a Democratic administration which sends you about like 75% of what was promised, but immediately. So I mean, I will say that I certainly appreciate the change of venue.
Yes.
And that's
in
marginal
regards to how these
improvement
things
for
are
you.
handled. And if you're from the Democratic People's Republic of California, you know you're getting an extra $600.
David, you were going to say something?
Oh, I just said that's marginal improvement for you, right? That's
I appreciate it. Vote blue no matter.
that's
The
why
Democrats, marginal improvements, everybody. Okay.
that's
promise.
anarcho-Bidenism working.
Yeah, I'm a national Bidenist. I think that honestly, like once we get corn pop, most of our problems will be solved.
Steve, any thoughts about any of this?
Oh, well, I mean, yeah, like to your points about marginal improvement, it's really more often the case is like marginal fixing the shit that we fucked up in the first place. And that's all there is to it.
It's essentially putting a metal panel over the pothole and not doing anything about it.
I resent the implication, sir. As a member of a younger generation, I had absolutely no part in any of this memeing. I blame this entirely on the boomers and the Gen Xers that preceded me. Thank you.
Okay. just
Well,
a quick poll here. Who here is a millennial?
Older, right here.
Okay, so you're an Xer, Steve?
Mhm.
And yourself, Isaac?
I think I qualify as a millennial.
Okay.
When is the cutoff date?
I want to say 2000 is the hard cutoff date, maybe even a little later, but don't quote me. I'm not a
Jesus Christ! If it's
No,
before
no,
2000,
no,
what does
no.
that make me?
Not when you were born. That's it's 2000's more it's if basically like if you've graduated high school after 2000, It's more,
Oh, okay.
more to that effect.
I'm one of those hip kids who knows how to use the iPhone.
Exactly.
I graduated
s-
at 2000, so
Okay,
Oh, you're one
so
of us now.
I have heard of TikTok, if that
yes,
indicates.
the ticking and the talking
Grandpa,
and the,
please stop. Stop using the cool words.
okay.
Lord have mercy.
So moving on to our next topic, the Gavin Newsom recall
Oh.
efforts. Now, I want to point out that I vividly remember when Governor Gray Davis was recalled over, if I recall, might have been vehicle registration fees, and we brought in the governor Arnold Schwarzenegger, and by the time he left his 2-term assignment, we were deep in debt. So I sincerely hope that Gavin. I don't like Gavin Newsom. I think he's not doing enough to aid our to provide for us in the middle of this pandemic. But at the same time, it's like I know for a fact my gut is telling me that the Republicans essentially want to bring in someone who'll turn us into Texas. So yeah, around the horn, thoughts on the recall effort?
So the reason
Oh,
I
sorry.
wanted to talk about this was because I find it really interesting because obviously Republicans are leading this effort. And like I don't like Gavin Newsom, but like the question of should we recall Gavin Newsom to me is like, well, recall him and replace him with who? Like obviously these Republicans have the idea of like replacing him with a Republican, and obviously like I'm not super on board with that.
doesn't he
Um,
have to go to a vote?
well, that's the thing is it looks like they're tracking to get it to a recall, which would mean first, I think we vote on if we, I think actually it's the same ballot. We vote on if we recall, and if so, who do we replace them with?
Mm-hmm.
And just in general though, I think I'm just not a fan of recalls in general, because to me, it's just like, I mean, I don't know when his term is up, but why not just uh, vote him out? And I feel kind of similarly towards like with the Cuomo stuff. I do think he should resign, and like, you know, I think he's a terrible person. But like, I don't necessarily understand the efforts to go so hard for like getting people out as opposed to just being like, just vote him out. Then
Yeah. So a little bit of insight into this. If I recall my California, I took a course about California government and politics way back in Cal Poly, and if I recall, California stands alone as if not the only direct democracy, but certainly the biggest direct democracy state in this country. So that's why any proposition needs to gather signatures. Any legislation can either be sourced from the people or as opposed to being proposed by our representatives. And I believe that's why we also have the recall effort instead of impeachment. Like what's going on in New York with Governor Cuomo, they would have to impeach him if he's not going to resign. Here in California, we have the recall effort, and if I also recall, to get the recall effort on the ballot, you have to reach half of the number of signatures based on how many people voted in the last gubernatorial election. So you need half of the number of those signatures to get the recall on the ballot. And then you would vote on either do we want to retain Governor Newsom or do we want to replace him immediately with somebody else? And I
also, I
have.
don't think there's any way he's gonna not pass the recall vote.
You'd be
personally,
Well,
but
no, that's the problem is that a recall election is sort of like I believe something to take note of is that Governor Schwarzenegger won with around 35% of the vote, if I recall,
Okay.
because there were 4 candidates in the race last time around,
Mm-hmm.
2 Republicans and 2 Democrats. And I believe, you know, it's sort of like functions on those old rules where we're in like, oh, the second person becomes the lieutenant governor and something along those lines. It's a different form of election, which makes it a lot more difficult to just sort of pass it on to the Democrats. You're going to have a chance that if there is a significant splintering of the vote, like there was in 2004, of a potentially popular Republican coming through and actually gaining a plurality.
so this
Right.
is basically the Republicans trying to trick us into electing a Republican governor.
Well, here's the problem. It's Arnold Schwarzenegger like was a freaking movie star, so
Mhm.
people gave him a chance because they're sitting there going like, what's the worst he can do? And he managed to get a plurality of the vote.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he had the kavorka, he had charisma, the kind of charisma to where people went along with it basically.
So it's actually a very if there is not really a sense of unity on the Democratic side, if you've got more than one Democrat running, those could be the factors that lead to a Republican somehow ending up as governor of California. But then again, the state's changed a great deal in
Yeah.
17 years.
But I think that's the dynamic that makes it interesting to me, is that you have a lot of progressives and leftists who don't like Newsom, and I think as a knee jerk would like the idea of recalling him. I think I'm kind of in that camp. And
Well,
so,
yeah,
and I feel
yeah.
like, so the question is, should we be giving this thought in terms of like, I think we should tread very carefully here, because what might look like a tempting thing to do could end up, we could end up with a Republican governor. So I just think it's important that
so-
we're mindful about how we handle this.
So I feel differently about this. First of all, Gavin Newsom vetoed the ranked choice vote, and for that, he is forever on my shit list. Like, I
Agreed.
do want him out for that reason alone. I don't need any other reasons. Ranked choice voting would fix a lot of problems. There's even better forms of voting, like star voting, easier to understand. Anything's better than this first past the post manipulation that has been done to the idea of democracy in our country. That said, honestly, I really think we need to just take removing assholes from power as our win. If you get enough people that are just losing their jobs, and let's say it even becomes a whole new thing where they perfect some method of being able to get people from the other party in when someone's pushed out. The point is that the people voted and won the opportunity to get rid of a stupid asshole who should never have been in power to begin with. As long as we can show that and prove that to the people, we're going to have their votes coming back for more. And when we just put ourselves in the role of running for election and being able to get noticed in spite of the media being against us, then we'll get progressives in. We'll get people that are better than both of these shit for brains parties. And it just means we need to overrun and override. It doesn't, if we keep showing caution, like I respect where you're coming from, David, but if we keep showing caution and go, oh, but the other, this piece of shit's a bigger piece of shit, and I'm so worried that they might win it and be a bigger piece of shit, and it could be worse. That's how they hold us down. It's fear.
I think what I really, I hear your point. I think what I'm really thinking is like, I feel like the left should probably be like being very strategic right now in terms of like, I don't know, getting a candidate ready, or like just being ready to have like a unified front so that we don't end up with that worse outcome. Because I just think it seems like the more we leave up to happenstance, it just seems like happenstance always gonna like lead to a bad road, in my opinion. Because the way the stage is tilted in politics. And so I just think this is something that leftists should be trying to think about and be strategic about.
I would like to add here that I'm more inclined to what David is saying, and I want to point out is that any sort of what you could call a insurgent vote that would be aligned or otherwise identifying with leftist or progressive causes, we don't have that presence here in California. I mean, our Revolution LA, we're a small group, and the next biggest group, in fact, the biggest progressive group out there, the DSA, I mean, they don't have that kind of leverage, actually. I sincerely believe that as much as I might, nobody here likes Gavin Newsom, but unfortunately, like I said, progressives don't have leverage. They don't have as big of an influence as we think we do. So for us to support any kind of recall cause, essentially in my estimation, it's like cutting off your nose to spite your face. I sincerely believe that
I'm sorry, but how do you expect we're going to get power and influence if we're just going to keep backing off when there's the slightest
that's what I wanted to.
risk?
Well, that's what I wanted to bring up. I think progressives, leftists and progressives, would be better served building opposition on the local, the city, the city and the county levels, and just kind of amassing, because y- y- I think to take the shot at the governor's office would be a little bit too premature. I think we need to grow something organic on the ground level, because a recall election is really quick compared to a proper gubernatorial election. And like I said, I don't think that we have the means to make that shot. And if we do end up making that shot, it's just going to blow up in our faces, I believe.
Yeah, I'd like to, you know, oddly enough, I really do agree with Steve on this matter. If folks remember to just to the recent primary, the Democratic primary, progressives took the state. Progressives took this state in the Democratic primary. This is a progressive state. The infrastructure is there. We just need to look to the Bernie campaign. They managed to mobilize voters across this country, and if you count in the people freaking who are near progressives, like those who voted for Warren and all this such, you have a phenomenal springboard from which you can actually take statewide power. So I understand that the idea is to build local power, and that's where your communities can be affected the most. But we can have ambitions in this state. This isn't freaking Wyoming. This isn't Florida. This isn't a swing. This is a solid blue state. You can actually accomplish these things here.
Well, the reason why I have this perspective is that I served as a Bernie victory campaign during the 2020 election, and let me tell y'all, if I became so disillusioned, that's the big reason why I wrote that investigation into allegations of abuse within the California state campaign. Basically, like I have it's the ground volunteers. And maybe and I would say most of like the field organizers, they were in it for the cause, but the higher level campaign the higher ups within the California state campaign, they were essentially like staffers and had this kind of mercenary they were almost entirely mercenary, basically. So it's what I'm trying to get at is that if we were to put up this insurgent Bernie style state campaign, um if the last time we tried it was said anything, it's that I really do believe that we'd end up like I don't think we'd want. I think that we'd find ourselves in another situation with mercenary people leading us, basically.
If
And
the
God,
if the DSA can do it in Nevada, you can do it here.
But that was progress. Like Bernie didn't win the primary, but we got a lot of progress out of his movement.
I get you, but I mean, maybe I just have a grudge. I mean, Chuck Rocha can go burn in hell as far as I'm concerned, and his Latino outreach was what um, got Bernie that huge tide of votes here in California and Nevada. At the same time, he's a grifter, if anything. So um, I'll say this, I'm gonna wait and see. I'm gonna have a wait and see approach. If progressives do decide to mount an insurgent campaign, and if there does seem to be movement in that direction, then by all means, go for it. But
So,
um,
so Ruben, you say you remember a recall election that do you remember voting in it?
oh, you got to understand, the last
And
recall
Isaac,
election was was what Arnold Schwarzenegger
It was
brought
grade
him
8. It was like in
to power.
2003 or 4.
Yeah, I
so
was
do
a
you remember how it works? Like the same, you get a ballot that says, should we recall? And then if so, with whom? Is that how it
Well,
works? Or are
y'all have
those
to y'all have to
separate?
understand. My parents weren't eligible to vote, so I
Oh,
didn't
okay.
see any kind of ballots going on. I just remember vividly, like the
It was in the news. Like,
it
everybody's
was in the
talking
news
about it.
everywhere, and of course, the governor rising to power and all that kind of stuff. Like, I have those vivid memories, but I was way too young to even conceive of the idea of voting or politics, basically. So
I'd like to correct myself before moving forward. He didn't achieve 35% of the vote. He achieved around like 48 or something along those lines. He's still the idea still holds true. He had a plurality, not a majority, because the Republican vote was split.
yeah, so
Nonetheless, yeah, Small correction on my part.
You mean the Democrat vote was split?
No. The Republican vote. There were 2 Republican candidates.
Oh, and was there a Democrat?
There was a Democrat, yeah.
And he just wasn't.
He didn't make it across the line. Arnold actually just performed very well his first time around. Very well.
So yeah, let's
Wait.
I shouldn't speak as the group, but I think it'd be best that we just wait and see if this is only only efforts are being made to get the recall.
It does look like they're tracking though. That's and the reason I brought it up was because I read in the press recently. It does look like they're tracking to get the recall. So it's just going to be a question of how that pans out.
Just one thing that I also want to say before we move on is I want you to remember that what happened with Bernie in the last year, Biden chose to risk Trump becoming president so as to prevent Bernie from becoming president. Bernie was winning. He was ahead in the polls. And then Biden pulled his bullshit where he, behind closed doors, made agreements, probably promised Kamala Harris the VP position, and made other concessions behind closed doors to get them to endorse. And then that was what overwhelmed the Bernie campaign. And not only that, trying to declare victory as soon as there was any bit of a lead by the media, that was what did it. So what I'm saying is, keep in mind that the whole campaign, Biden was, we can't let Trump win. We can't let Trump win. Trump's a bigger piece of shit. He's a bigger piece of shit than me. Don't vote for Trump. Vote for me because I'm not as big of a piece of shit as he is. Meanwhile, yes, Biden, you're a fucking piece of shit because you, as much as you hate Trump, decided he's not as bad as your close friend Bernie. And then that's where Bernie fucked up, is even identifying that psychopath as a friend. It's just it's outright stupid on all fronts. But my point being, this is how they control us, with the fear that we have to always choose between douche versus turd sandwich every fucking election.
Yeah,
and we have to say we have standards of neither. Go in and write abstain. Do that in mass, and we will fuck them up because they can't ignore that in the polls. They can't say you're crazy because you chose to abstain and make it publicly noteworthy that you chose to abstain.
My abstention was a vote for the Green candidate, but I mean, like in any case, I think that if progressives don't seize the day, then what's the point? Them sitting around and waiting for incremental change or something. Be the change. If you're going to work through the Democratic Party, do what they did in Nevada, take control of the party structure, do what you can. Mm-hmm. I mean, we have the opportunity to actually, in some of these blue states like California, be the template for what we want to replicate throughout the country.
I would like to, I think, David, unless you have any closing thoughts on this matter.
I think my closing thoughts on this are, I'm kind of like a both sider when it comes to issues like this, in the sense that I do agree that progressives and leftists and socialists, we need to do a better job of not being afraid to challenge power and stand up to them and be like, we're not scared of you and we're not scared of how you're going to fearmonger. But at the same time, I'm not a sort of person who wants to go bull in the china shop, mostly because I know people like me won't fare well in an apocalyptic setting. But I just think it's important to balance sort of like strategy and playing the game with also being not afraid to go up to power and say, I'm not scared of you, I'm not backing down. And I think we've seen that with the Progressive Caucus now and their sort of refusal to weaponize their votes on anything. Because it's like, yeah, I think you can say they can't weaponize their votes to pass their whole entire agenda. Like that would never work. But to say like, no, like here's one thing, we're not backing down and we're weaponizing our votes. So what are you going to do? So again, I just think, so relating it back to Gavin Newsom, I just think To me, it's just like I'm concerned because it looks like we could potentially be headed for replacing Gavin Newsom with a Republican, and I'm definitely not on board with that. But at the same time, like Steve said, like, yeah, I haven't forgiven him for vetoing ranked choice voting, which would have helped in this issue. So it was clearly strategic to protect his own power. So I'm definitely not a Gavin Newsom fan. I definitely would love to see him, have to leave office, but I would just like to see a strategy around it.
You know what? I'm on the recall Newsom train now. I'm like, just get rid of the guy and launch a progressive campaign because I mean, think about it. 35% of the vote. Frankly speaking, a Democrat will probably win either way, even if there is a split.
Sorry, but I have just one thought here. A thought experiment I think could be done to just clarify a further point here. Ask yourself, if the two evils on the table were Republicans and you had to choose between which public Republican was the bigger piece of shit to not vote for, and then make sure you vote for the other guy because it's just one or the other, would you then have a line in the sand standard where you're like, fuck them both, I'm not voting for either?
There definitely has to be a line in the sand. And I think to me that test, like in the primary, came when Michael Bloomberg entered the race. And I was like, I know they're not about to tell us to vote for Michael Bloomberg.
And my closing
but
thoughts.
I agree there needs to be a line in the sand. I just think ultimately that line is in different places for different people.
Fair.
My closing thoughts on this matter is this, it's not that I don't have my issue here is that I personally don't have faith in whoever could call themselves a progressive politician. I still kind of have a grudge towards Bernie, and I know that's a little irrational, but also, I mean, we could apply this to like look at AOC. Like she ran on universal health care. She ran on all these frankly what's considered radical here in this country. But ever since then, like she's taken the idea of Medicare for all. She's kind of dropped that. In fact, now she's pushing for COBRA subsidies. So, I mean, if we had a candidate here in California, a progressive candidate who I could trust frontwards and backwards, I would say, yeah, let's do it. Let's do it. But at this point, I don't know of anybody, and I quite honestly don't have faith that anybody would do a better job of it. Maybe not so much a better job of it, but anybody could take on Gavin Newsom and not just take on Gavin Newsom, but also do everything in their power to provide for our material interests, basically. So I don't want to come off as if it's the lesser of two evils. It's more like, or the devil that, it's like, I don't know. I'm a little down on it right now. But in any case, I do encourage every single person who's listening here, if you're part of a progressive movement, if you are a DSA member like myself, please do bring this up and pressure them into saying like, hey, are we going to where are we going on this issue, basically? Because progressive movements do have influence in this state, and just get out there, basically. Now, to our main topic of today's discussion. I posted it in the group chat. So, yesterday I posted in our group the super straight movement to
we
give
we skipped St. Patty's Day.
Oh, did we want to touch on that real quick, actually?
Or do we want to skip that?
Doesn't matter to me.
Out your black and tans, come out and fight me like a man.
Well,
Let's
okay,
go.
I guess we'll touch. So this week is going to be St. Patty's Day, and Isaac, you seem to have a little bit of insight of what's going on in Ireland right now.
Oh yeah. I think it was the UDF announced a little while ago that they were going to be withdrawing from the Good Friday Agreement.
Now, for those of us
a great way to inaugurate 2021.
Now, for those of us who don't know who the UDF is, or maybe haven't heard of the Good Friday Agreement, would you explain?
Well, they're a loyalist paramilitary organization. Basically, when the strife began in Northern Ireland, a lot of organizations came around that were fighting on either side of the communities. For instance, the world, everybody knows about the IRA,
Mhm.
but I mean, well, the IRA is not one homogenous group. You got the officials, you got the provos, you got the reals, you got all sorts of other groups. On the I don't want to say on uh, the Protestant side, you have groups such as the what is it, the Ulster Volunteers, those sorts of individuals. They generally speaking espouse a loyalty to the United Kingdom, identify with their Protestant heritage, consider themselves part of the United Kingdom, and are a strong driving force in trying to essentially stymie what Sinn Féin and other Republican and nationalist organizations call them, any sort of attempt to make Northern Ireland more of an Irish province, or prepare it for reunification with the rest of Ireland.
I think it's important to clarify as well that when we speak, Ireland's Republicans are much different than our Republicans here in the United States.
Oh yes, as some of you may know, the United Kingdom's a kingdom, and there's a great stretch of republicanism, as in trying to form a government based upon democratic or republican principles without a monarchy within Ireland. It was part and parcel, a key tenet of their resistance and their revolutionary history. um, People who are Republicans in the context of Northern Ireland, there's also the term nationalist, want to leave the United Kingdom and reunite with Ireland, because they consider Ulster, which is that little northern bit of Northern Ireland, to be a part of a greater Republic of Ireland, which was not made independent and whole when the treaty between the Irish Free State and the United Kingdom was signed, when their War of Independence ended in the 20s, I believe.
Now, as somebody who's looking on the outside in, I'm going to admit I'm a little ignorant on this whole thing, but I think my main concern is that with Brexit is coming. Like I remember 2019 when they might have been late 2019, early 2020 when the vote was cast, and they said, yeah, we're going to do Brexit. One of the things that would come to pass was a complete dismantling of the NHS and in transition to a more privatized system like what we have here in America, and also the concerns about if Brexit does happen, they're going to start putting up border checkpoints in Ireland. So as far as I'm concerned, solidarity with the efforts to unify and separate themselves from England and where they're going as far as Brexit goes.
That's a bit of a problem. I don't mean to run roughshod on everybody else who wants to enter the discussion, but there are two communities in Northern Ireland. There is a community that identifies strongly with the United Kingdom, and one that identifies strongly with the Republic of Ireland. And I mean, to favor one or the other is generally thought to inaugurate more conflict, because I mean the troubles weren't like the IRA blowing everything up. It was a three-way street, frankly speaking, of the British government, of loyalists and of nationalists, all contending with one another. So I mean, I as much as I love to, as much as I sympathize with the Republicans, and I historical nerd myself, and I know of what they've been through, to blatantly go around and say, well, I mean, let's hope in the end that they go back. Well, a lot of people are going to die along the way, and it's a really sad sort of thing for Ireland. Who would have thunk it would have been the UDF that was the first ones who withdrew? Yeah, everybody was all worried about like borders in Ireland and trying to keep the IRA from getting angry or something like that. But no, in their attempts to try and placate the nationalist community, they set the border, as it were, in the sea, and it seems to have annoyed a considerable part of the Protestant community. Because something that we don't take into consideration is that an attempt to try and say push customs checks or a frontier or border outside of the boundaries of Ireland is an affront to their their position, which is, well, we are an integral part of the United Kingdom and we shouldn't be treated as, say, an overseas territory, a lost province of Ireland or a European colony.
God forbid they're
God
treated as
forbid.
an overseas territory. Not one of those.
Yeah, so God forbid anything happens in Northern Ireland, but to see a group just sort of blatantly say, okay, well, the killing can start again. That's
Yeah.
that's not good.
Well, my sincere hope is, and I know that I'm coming out of it, an ignorant, a fairly ignorant American, is that not just peace, of course, because peace at what cost, or at whose definition of peace, but I genuinely hope that something. That hopefully comes to pass, that something some genuine progress comes out of this, basically, because if it's my marginal knowledge about Ireland tells me that either way they are essentially like second class citizens as far as the United Kingdom sees them. And I apologize if I am generalizing, but I will say this, that I have nothing but solidarity and empathy for those who might end up suffering and who are fighting for a better Ireland right now.
Yeah, and things were looking up too. Stormont reopened, the mandatory coalition was going again. I mean, but Brexit was going to sting.
So my understanding, or sorry,
Steve.
You go ahead.
I don't know necessarily how this much about Ireland, but as I understand, there has this particular conflict, because it's always been about Catholics versus the Protestants, is just an ongoing holy war when it comes down to it, or at least that's what it's based in identifying one side versus the other. Meanwhile, up into the most contemporary times, there has been a growing anti-theocratic push in Ireland to try and catch up with the rest of the modern world. And so while I feel like, yes, there's probably some danger that is approaching, there might also be some harsher pushback to say, fuck your holy war,
Right.
to meet it at this point.
And again, I'll say this, from what I know about the whole Catholic Protestant split, it's less to do with I won't say less to do, but the how should I say this? Those who identify more as who identify more with the United Kingdom identify themselves as Protestant, basically. Like the United Kingdom is not affiliated. Their official church is the Anglican Church, which has separated themselves from the Catholic Church. That was Henry VIII's doing, but it was almost used as a sort of like, no, I'm a Protestant. I'm a proper English citizen. And the Catholics, where Ireland was natural, or not naturally, but they were the majority were Catholic. They identified more with their nationalist roots, basically. Like
there is also something to take into consideration. It's not just also a designation. It's like, well, I'm Protestant, I'm loyal, I'm a Catholic. There was genuine discrimination for a very long time in the United Kingdom against Catholics, like state-sponsored discrimination. Like, you were not allowed to hold office. You would be actually a second-class citizen if you were a Catholic, and that didn't start to change until the 19th and 20th centuries. Like, that sting of being an actual factual second class citizen is still very prevalent, not just for Irish Catholics, for whom that feeling is probably most profound, but also for Catholics genuinely across the United Kingdom. But I mean, religion is one of those poles, one of those those flags from which these communities have rallied around.
And that doesn't take away from the fact that Ireland, as it stands now, is a theocracy. The UK, even though it does couch itself in religious justifications for its royalty and what have you, they are not in any way effectively a theocracy. You don't get limited in your ability to run for public office based on your expressed belief, like by the law. And yet that is the case in Ireland. You cannot run for public office in Ireland unless you are Catholic. And so it's not just Ireland that does this. Poland is another nation state that's essentially a Catholic theocracy. And so to that effect, honestly, I will go, like, this is just my personal opinion, but I don't recognize any, I will never recognize any sovereignty of a theocracy, like, anywhere ever. Like, you do not get to tell me that because you have invisible springs in the sky that you get to rule and be in charge. There should be democracy. There should be representation of the people. I don't care what you believe. What you believe is just that, just empty hopes of what could be, of the unknown, right? So who cares? I don't care. You can't justify that, and you can't enforce your beliefs on people. You can't tell people what they can and cannot believe, or should or shouldn't believe.
I would like to add to that I would like to add to that is that separation of church and state is an important thing to have within any successful democracy. I sincerely believe that, and it would be nice if we were to completely separate. I mean, let me put it this way: ideally, we would have a complete separation between church and state, but you could say that the machinations of certain political groups out there, certainly here in America, where they align themselves heavily with a given religious cause as a means to build their base or motivate their base. That's been happening for the longest time, and I'm not excusing it, but that's the reality of it. And I do hope that this sort of that secularism does, that a more secular government does come about, not just here in America, but certainly in Ireland and other countries in the world. But I think that kind of remains to be seen.
Well, actually, it's very interesting. This is something that's happened very recently in 2020. The main Northern Irish sort of nationalist party that was associated with the IRA for the longest time, Sinn Féin, actually swept through the most recent Irish general election on a tide of what is it called? I would say a left-wing wave, and became essentially one of the largest parties in the Irish Parliament overnight. It was tremendous, the outpouring of support that they received, and I think that's not necessarily because of their history with sympathizing with their Catholic, with their Catholic heritage, but rather what you described, which is a general shift towards a more secular society, a socialist society, one that is like more egalitarian than based on the traditional hierarchies that came before. I mean, we had they actually had a frightening number of referenda recently in Ireland, one that actually, I believe, allowed gay marriage several years back during the previous parliament. And now here we are with what would have been essentially, if they had run more candidates, that was one of their big failings as to why they didn't form a majority. They didn't run enough candidates in all the places because they didn't think they'd have a shot. But you saw that there is this great outpouring of a secularist sort of sentiment, a left-wing sentiment, as opposed to the conservative and liberal establishment, which had governed this country for almost like 70 years since they gained their independence.
So yeah,
we should probably move on. God help us.
Well, Isaac, I just want to say that I really do appreciate the insight that you brought here. Like I only had a minuscule compared to you. My understanding was minuscule, and it was well appreciated. Thank you so much.
Before moving on, though, my understanding, though, was that Ireland has a vote coming up in the near future, right? For
like a general or a referendum?
I thought they were voting on independence from the United Kingdom.
Oh, Northern Ireland? No. But Well, there's a lot of parts of the United Kingdom that have like these nationalist parties, like Scotland and all the such, who are always trying to like, oh, we're gonna have a vote on this. But it's usually Scotland that's, the SNP government's always like, yeah, we're gonna have a vote, we're gonna have a vote, they just keep on droning on about it. But in terms of Northern Ireland, whilst reunification and a referendum is one of the areas of one of the positions of Sinn Féin, which is the largest nationalist party in their assembly, um, they have to make a lot of concessions because they govern hand in hand with the largest conservative Protestant organization or political party, the DUP. So they trade these sorts of things. Yeah, we're committed to reunification, but we have to make this government work. So, and that's actually very interesting that the both of those communities are sort of forced to work together in a government like of national unity in Northern Ireland.
Um, okay,
We should
so
move on.
yes, just great talk, everybody, on that. And I guess our final topic for today is the super straight social media phenomenon. I shared a link of this article to y'all, and essentially, what I've observed and what I've read up on is that there's this new movement of, shall we say, straight identifying individuals, cisgendered. It's important that we designate them also as cisgender to identify themselves as super straight. Excuse me. They've adopted this color scheme that remarkably looks the same to be the Pornhub color scheme. You can make all kinds of jokes about that. And some of the memes have been incredibly distressing. I know I posted one meme where it showed essentially a kid saying I'm super straight, and a trans person with trans colors approaching that kid, seemed to bully, and then a pair of super straight individuals there to protect the kid. I legitimately believe that this is another move to marginalize, if not bring about outright aggression towards our trans brothers and sisters. And there's also the fact that 4chan has taken this and run with it. They've made no two ways about it that, super straight SS and this whole fashy undertones. What are your guys' thoughts on this issue?
I would really like to take this opportunity to go on one of my favorite rants, which is the problematic nature of the etymology of the word straight in the context of sexuality. Um, the word is largely believed to be coined by a Christian scientist who, George W. Henry, in the book Sex Variants, where he referred to that was when he referred to heterosexual people as the word straight. And for a while now, I've been trying to.
Well, real quick, you mentioned Christian Scientist, and if that's not a bigger paradox or contradiction, I don't know what is.
Right, and it's been problematic for throughout the course of American history, obviously with like eugenics and such.
Mhm.
But yeah, I've been going on this rant now for like a couple of years now. Basically, I think the word straight as a synonym for heterosexuality is problematic. I think obviously it has implications. It implies that that queer people are sort of crooked or what have you.
Mhm.
So, and I feel like this is it's a perfect opportunity to talk about that because obviously, super straight, is obviously trying to like, to really play into that implication. So just one of my favorite pet rants. But also, yeah, I mean, it also sort of it brings up that conversation around like the problematic nature of like dating apps and like so there's so much transphobia and racism on dating apps. And I guess, yeah, I mean, I think it's sort of like casually accepted in a lot of social circles that I've observed. I think it's weird to say that you won't date a whole group of people. I don't really understand. I mean, I understand here it's transphobia and it's antagonism, but I think that a lot of well-meaning people co-opt that language, and I do think it's weird to say something like I won't date trans people or I won't date Asian people or what have you.
Mhm.
It's not necessary. Like people can observe who you date. You don't need to disqualify a whole group of people, like especially because like you don't know, like you haven't met every single trans person, so how
Yeah,
can you even know?
yeah, you want, if anything, to like just mention if there's certain features you find attractive or not as attractive. That's the furthest extent that should ever go.
I feel we'd be beating around the bush with that, I think, though.
I mean,
Not really. It's okay to be like, it's okay to say what attracts you and doesn't attract you, right? But when you're saying you're canceling out a whole group or ethnicity, even worse, because they're that group or ethnicity, then there's something else underlying that you want to talk to your therapist about.
And as a as a brown person, I'm immediately sensitive to the idea of a person saying, well, I prefer this racial group over another, basically, and that's certainly you certainly see parallels when people say, well, I wouldn't date a trans person. I would agree with you, David, that it's myopic at best, basically, to say I wouldn't date X because it's like, have you even met somebody from that group? Or maybe somebody from that group exists within your social circle. You either don't know or they haven't told you, essentially.
So if just to harken back to the super straight topic a little again, so I find so I understand where you guys are saying it's problematic and hurtful. Definitely seems to be at least the intent for some people on this, but it seems to me almost like it's just so ripe for clowning that I wonder if that's like the one second. Well, go away. I wonder if that's the intent behind it. So for example, yeah, like if you're going to be straight, that's one thing, you're heterosexual, but to be super straight, what is something super straight, right? How many metaphors can we work with here, right? Yeah, you're so straight, dude. You are so straight. You are as straight as your cock in my mouth, hands down, right?
Oh my God.
I would want to. I would. Oh no, Isaac, if you have thoughts.
Oh no, I'm just saying things, but I'd prefer one thing. Let's remember that this is just a bunch of memers on a forum just like causing trouble.
That's
like
true.
at the end of the day, I mean, like the same thing. The principle holds when it comes to dealing with the troll. Don't like take it too serious. Don't, the moment you start reposting and talking about it and turning, you're feeding the troll, basically. And it only gets worse. I would critically analyzing. I'm so sorry to cut you off. Critically analyzing a mean-spirited joke, I think inadvertently makes it more powerful and gives the desired effect to those who had caused it. That's just my opinion.
To Steve's earlier point about how far are we sure that this isn't just one elaborate joke, or do people sincerely believe it? I would like to say that Poe's law is an MFer. Okay, yeah. And for those who are listening who don't know, Poe's law essentially states that that the line between a really elaborate joke and sincere propaganda, it's so it's blurry at that point. There might as well not even be a line. So as far as I'm concerned, like, we've reached this point in our discourse and in our politics to where even if the original intender made it as a joke, however sincere they might be, somebody's going to grab that and run with it in another direction.
Oh no, I don't mean to say that this was a sincere joke. As like this was a meme created on 4chan, literally made, like, they're messing around with the colors on the forums. They're like, hey, look, super straight. It's like the lightning bolts for the SS, but it's two S's, super straight. Don't you see? It's like it isn't meant to be a nice, sort of. It's trolling, but like, I mean, I don't think trolling,
Yeah, I just feel it's even if there are people that get away with utilizing it as a reason to bully others, it's so much more valuable as something to goof on homophobic Nazis with. Like, I think that's really it makes them look dumber. It makes them look goofier. just
Don't you?
slapping it on there like, yes, just like super straight. How much straighter could you get? Like, just tug on that rope even harder, make it more straight.
I will.
You know,
Yeah, I
keep
will say
tugging,
one thing.
keep
That's
tugging,
very
straight
interesting.
man.
Have you ever noticed how, like, like the most homophobic people are sometimes the ones with the most homoerotic tendencies in whatever they do and going forward? For some reason, when it comes to all the the fashy people, for some reason they're always obsessed with anime and the what's it called? It's in the what is it called? There's always a strange tendency that far right wing people are the ones that always end up like coming out and like, oh well, there's this feminine Japanese boy, that's my avatar, and it's like, oh dear.
Now, that's a subgenre of anime called yaoi, boys love. Kind of outing myself as a former otaku here. But one thing that I do want to also bring up is that I wouldn't push that whole thing about how the most homophobic people are often the most probably have some kind of unresolved issues because
Oh no, I said it's an interesting tendency. I didn't mean
it
to
is,
imply
it
that there
is.
is a.
But one thing that I kind of observed, I remember a whole bunch of SNL jokes about, oh, isn't it weird how close Trump and Putin are to each other? Is there something? Are they gay, basically? And it's almost like as much as they're trying to, they think that they're sticking it to Putin, who has been led essentially violence against LGBTQ people in Russia. It's also when you swing it around, it's almost like, well, they have this, oh, gay people are kind of violent towards each other or do this kind of thing. Basically, you can't help it, and I think that it's kind of dangerous to not that I'm saying that you shouldn't, but it's like be a little careful about talking in that kind of thing,
The
basically.
Trump Putin meme, speaking on behalf of all gay people ever. Yeah, I did take issue with the Trump Putin meme because it was playing on like the whole idea that like homosexuality is a punchline and it's funny and it's like,
Yeah.
we still haven't kind of moved past that in our sort of, even in progressive circles, we still haven't moved past this idea of like it's funny. And like like it happens to me often enough, like people will make jokes about like even people who are like cool with gay people, they'll say something like, oh, wouldn't it be funny if like I made out with a dude or something? And I'm just like, I don't see why that would be funny. Like it's what's
Don't you get it? It's like me, a guy.
like, what's the punchline?
What's going on here?
Yeah,
So
it's like, what's the punchline? I don't understand. Which I do understand, which is culturally we're coming into like being comfortable with all this. But I do think that's like symptomatic, yeah, of like a sort of.
What's up, Steve?
I would just say that, like, that's where you want to push it just that one cycle more. Like the point is no longer to say that homosexuality is weird and odd and out of the box. The point now is to say, look at these homophobes so afraid, so scared of something so like simple as a cock in their face, right? It's just why are people so scared of sex? Why are people so scared of this one aspect of human anatomy? You can push on so many fronts to just go that one extra mile of like, yes, they're into cock and you're afraid of it.
I think it's very
how important is, like, I'm straight. I don't have
Yeah.
to go out of my way to make it known to the world, which is why I don't care. That's why I doubled down to a reference of like somebody's cock being in my mouth. I don't care. I think it's funny. I'm a big Kevin Smith fan through and through, so I love all that grunge humor.
Yeah, I mean, I think we all know really what the issue is. I mean, it's the fact is that it is viewed, generally speaking, amongst a good portion of the population that this somehow is an affront to your masculinity. That you're somehow you're not what is it called? It's quite a man. If this were to occur to you, you're lesser than others. And what revolts, what's revolting in that for them is that they feel as if that they're now lesser than what they really are, and this is why they react so poorly. Because no, I'm not one of those. I'm not one of those. What's their calls? It's I'm this tough guy. I'm there you go. And it's like,
quick.
That's just such a corrosive mentality that a society can maintain to force half of the population to constantly be in fear of losing some sort of status amongst themselves. It's crazy.
I feel like attitudes towards homosexuality, it's like one of the things they got right in ancient Greece. Like I've been reading about ancient Greece and I'm just like, damn, they got this right. Like there was no terms for like gay, straight, or bi. It was just understood. Like people just slept with.
I know a Greek man who always he's problematic AF, but like he always says no. You see, in Greece, it is a very specific thing. It's the man doing the penetrating that is the normal one. It's no. Hold on a moment there.
And I would like to point out that Greek, when we talk about the whole ancient Greek perspective on homosexuality, let's say that there's a reason why the word pederasty was invented by them, basically.
Right. I wanted to be very specific in terms of attitudes towards homosexuality because they obviously had sex slavery.
Well, it's 50% better than what we got now.
So, I would also like to state, along with Steve, that I also identify as straight. I'm comfortable enough in my identity to where that I don't go out of my way, or when I see something like this, I'm like, what the hell? Are you compensating for something? You're sounding a little, not anybody here, but the person who would say something like this, is super straight thing, seems like they're insecure about something, basically. And I would like to add that I think that this sort of meme, or this sort of whatever comes about it, should be met with utter derision, and if any antagonism comes out from this, it should be called out and just taken, call them out and ensure that put a stop to this shit, basically.
The best thing to do in when it comes to this sort of thing is just not to talk about it, so that it goes away, because then
That's
people
true.
will stop perpetuating it.
I really want to say too, since I sort of like centered myself in this conversation, this is like a very specific sort of a lob on trans people, and so I do think like I do think it's important to acknowledge that, and to acknowledge that like trans people have been thrown under the bus even by like the LGBT movement.
Mm-hmm.
So it is really important, like Ruben said, it's important that we protect trans people and that we stand up for them, and that we don't let them be used as a bargaining chip, which is what I feel like the dynamic kind of is now, is that conservatives are kind of like, okay, we'll be cool with gay people, but trans people, and we're not cool with them. And to me, like, that's not okay. And like, to me, it's like definitely like, an all of us or none of us mentality.
Moving the
it's
goalposts.
definitely important to protect and stand up for trans people.
Just be a decent person,
Yes.
That's we don't have to make it so complicated. Just be a decent person. Come on.
Right. Yeah.
I would
Jesus
say,
Christ.
I would say
Is
this,
it so hard?
It's the old joke that everybody's a little bit racist. Well, I would add to it, you don't have to say it. You don't have to express it, basically.
Listen, I've watched Avenue Q too, and I can say
well, I mean,
everybody's a little bit racist sometimes.
Well, so I think what it is people are naturally going to try and categorize, that's a sad fact of the human condition, is we try to make generalizations out of groups, because we're constantly fighting from group to group. The reality now, though, is that we have an opportunity to unite as one group, like one human entity. We don't have to be multiple groups fighting over who gets power. We can actually just go with humanity first and actually unite collectively, collaboratively, in the best way that we can possible with these strategies that have been selected for us, right? So
honestly, I think that we all Americans really at the core can get along with pretty much anybody within our country, except for people from Ohio or Mexicans. It's wonderful. I mean, we could.
So I just want to finish my point. My point was also to say the thing that people are doing, or the this group mentality, this analysis of these other people being the outsiders or the difference or the weirds. what needs to happen is more emphasis on, okay, but who the fuck are you, and don't you understand human empathy? So it's not so much like just be a decent person. Try to see from another person's perspective. Try to get into their head and understand them. Because if you don't, they're going to be the ones that figure you out first. And then where are you going to be? Like, how is that an advantage? Just
Yeah.
be empathetic, understand people, hear them out.
And
Confrontation is a very difficult sort of thing, though. I must
is.
admit, because I mean, approaching that in such a manner. I mean, when you sort of put the ball in the other person's court, and they look at you, and it's like, what are you trying to say, that I'm an awful person? And
Yeah.
then they shut you out entirely.
And
Well,
I
That's
do
half
know.
the problem with this country nowadays, is that most people, when it comes to all these issues, they think, oh well, you know, you think I'm a bad person? Well, F you. I'm not going to listen to you. I'm going to do whatever I was going to do beforehand.
And I would also like to add in is that, you know, that's the peril with social media. As much as we put ourselves out there, we also have to realize that on the other side, you know, in real life, this person might be a completely different person, or at the very least maybe open to discussing or coming to a common ground.
Oh.
And for what you said about all people uniting, Steve, we have a word for that, and it's called solidarity. And I sincerely believe in solidarity. I believe that we can find common cause in other people, but who genuinely want the best for others. I identify as a socialist for that reason. You know, I can take an educated guess that we might not all identify with on different points of the leftism spectrum. Certainly, Steve, you don't identify as a leftist at all, but I do believe that solidarity is something that can reach beyond sort of political titles and the such, basically.
Yeah. Well, like,
And
just to respond to that real quick, you know, saying you're a socialist, it's another label, for example. And this is just as a per example,
right.
not shaming
Yeah.
it, but it's like all of these labels. Why are we so obsessed with the labels? Why not at least put one label first and foremost, and that is that you are human. You and I, no matter who you are out there, we have that in common. We are stupid apes. I mean,
I get
that's
you.
what it comes down to.
I would say to that is that, you know, I use the label of socialist so that I can find common cause with not just other socialists, but other people who might be, who might find common cause with socialists.
Yeah,
You're
I'm not shaming it. I wasn't
no,
shaming
no,
it
no,
at
no,
all.
no,
Yeah.
no. I just wanted to bring my perspective on this. But any closing thoughts on this topic of the?
Well, I just wanted to like come, you know, add my 2 cents to that. Like, I actually agree with you, Steve, to a certain extent. I don't like to give myself labels. Well, for 2 reasons. One, because I don't want to have to defend any particular thing that, oh well, you think that, you know, you're a this, therefore you must. You know, I don't want to go through that whole business. But also because I think it would be insulting to my own personhood to sort of, you know, put me off into this bracket or that bracket. You know,
Mhm.
I'm a guy. I'm the combination of everything. You know, of all my experiences, and I would like to be judged on that basis as opposed to any other.
Now, to wrap it up, any final thoughts on the super straight thing? David, do you have any final thoughts?
I mean, I think what came to mind towards the end there when we were talking about communicating with people who we don't see eye to eye with, I was really thinking about Jonathan Haidt's book, uh, 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 The Righteous Mind, Why Good People Are Divided by Politics and Religion. And Jonathan Haidt's a social psychologist, and he kind of talks about the psychology behind liberalism and conservatism. But I think there's a lot to be gleaned from his insights into how people are oriented towards morality and things like that. So those are kind of my closing thoughts, I guess.
And I would like to add, you know, I certainly agree with Steve. You know, be good to each other. Have some basic empathy, and you know, have some basic empathy towards your fellow man, and be good to each other. That's how I would my final thoughts on this matter, basically. And so I think that kind of does it. We've recorded a little bit over an hour. I just want to say to everybody, thanks for attending this little unnamed project of ours.
Name
Hopefully,
pending.
name pending.
Name
That's right.
bending, yeah.
name pending for this little project. I sincerely hope that we can develop something regular out of this. And yeah, so yeah, thanks everybody, and I hope to do this again. And thanks to our listeners and viewers as well.
Thanks for watching.
you.
Thank you.